So it's week 9, and I'm just opening up Firebase Music Library, and we're going to want to add a scrolling text view on here, and then later on we're going to add some navigation. So I think what we'll do, I'm going to just launch the app, and I've got an idea of what we can do in terms of where it makes sense to add some scrolling content here, and I've provided some content for you. That was just my dummy app. So we're basically going to enable this, right? So we can put on a block of content and scroll through it. So what I think we will do is on our register activity, we'll add, I've grabbed kind of a sample terms and conditions, which is long, much longer than we've got the room for. So we're going to add a terms and conditions text view here. We'll plunk in a huge block of text, which I've put on Blackboard for you, and then we can enable the scrolling. Okay, there's a couple things we have to do in the activity XML, in the UI part, and then there's a couple things we have to do in the Java to enable it. So, if you go to Blackboard, in the Lesson 9 folder, I grabbed this from this website. There's these sample terms of use for a mobile app. So I haven't taken this entire thing, but I've taken kind of the first section of it and then reformatted it from HTML to plain text, including the line breaks. So this is just a text file. So go ahead and you can open or download this file, doesn't matter. I'll just open it here. Actually, I don't want to open it in the browser. I will download it. So just save this file somewhere and open it up in a text editor. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy this entire block of code and paste it into our strings.xml. We'll create a new string resource called terms, and this entire thing will be the value. Just select the entire thing. And in your Android project, we'll open up under resources, values, and strings. We'll create a new string called terms. The entire thing. Now, I realized in the assignment that content is probably going to be coming out of Firebase. That's fine. You can just query it, and then you fetch it into a string variable that way. So just save your strings.xml. And let's open up our register activity. So we've got on the register activity 3 edit texts for email, password, confirm, and then we have the register button below. So we want to put a text view below the register button. So we'll want our text view down here. And we'll size it as such that it definitely can't render all the text at once. We'll have to make it scrollable. So just add a text view on here. Our width will wrap the content. Our height will say wrap content. We'll give it an ID. We'll call it terms text view. We'll anchor it below our register button. So our top be to the bottom of the register button. Our left and right can be to the parent. we'll set a max lines property. And it will only show 10 lines of text at a time. That'll force the user to have to scroll. And the other thing we're going to add here, we're going to set the scroll bar's property to vertical. We don't need horizontal scrolling. We need vertical scrolling. It's a fairly standard text view. The only things that are new are the scroll bar's attribute and the max line. So the last two attributes we haven't used before. The other thing we can set, I guess I didn't set this, is let's set the text property equal to that string resource we created called terms. So it automatically pulls the text from the XML file. Text equals string / terms. We can run the app now and have a look at it. Just apply those changes. So I've got to click to go to my register. So we only see 10 lines, but notice it isn't scrollable yet. It is set here. We should probably actually add a little bit of padding to this. Kind of hard to read. The other thing we might want to do is increase the text size a little bit, even though it is terms and conditions. It's literally the small print. So up to you. So I'll add maybe just a bit of padding here. Well, padding of, let's say, BP. There, it looks a little better. So you'll notice, you may have noticed if you saw when it first loaded, there was very briefly a little scroll indicator that popped up right here. But it's gone away and it's not scrollable yet. So we do have to do something in the back end in order for that scrolling to work. Just enabling the scroll bar property isn't enough. So now let's go into, we need to go into the Java class. We'll go into our register activity. We'll declare our text view up here. It will also require us to import TextView class. Alt enter import class. We'll instantiate view. Then we need to call this method. We need to call set movement method. In effect, the scroll bars aren't active. We have to enable scrolling programmatically, which is kind of odd. You'd think if we put scroll bars in the control, it would automatically scroll, but it doesn't. And our movement is a new scrolling movement method. Personally, I find this quite weird that we would need to do this, but we can see it doesn't do anything when we just add the scroll bars in the XML. It's not enough to actually make the functionality active. I'll apply those. So now you can see, well, the scroll bar is now here. Now that's setting the scroll on a single text view, which for the purposes of your app that you're building, that may be sufficient. The other option you have is there's two other kind of like scrolling containers. The older one, it hasn't been deprecated, but it's more of a legacy control. There's a scroll view. So that's basically a scrollable container if we want to put multiple views inside it, like let's say a text view and an image or a list view. We would nest those inside of the scroll view, and then that entire container can be scrollable. The newer version of this, I'll just pull up the documentation just so we can have a quick look at it. Is called the nested scroll view. So this is newer, wasn't added until API 22. So it's like the scroll view, but it can act as both a parent and child on newer and old. So it's basically an updated version of the scroll view. So we can nest a series of tags inside the nested scroll view. So for example, if we want a scrollable list, then each item in that list is composed of a series of controls, a text view, a series of buttons and images. We can repeat that list and scroll through it. So that's probably the control we would use. Just to show you an example of what this looks like. Go here to the Android design pattern. If we can find the XML sample. No, there's no sample here, the XML. Okay. So you can look at this if you want to do more than simply. Oh, great, that's neat. If you want to do more than scroll within a simple text view or single control. Anybody have a problem getting this to work? Fairly simple, I imagine. Enable a couple of properties, call the one method. All right, so I want to move on to navigation. So I'll give you an overview of some of the options and what this kind of looks like, and then we'll go ahead and implement it. So you have to listen to me for 5 or 10 minutes, or pretend to listen to me. So we have a bunch of different choices. We'll look at some of them. And most, obviously, of the current controls, they follow. Material design has a set of guidelines, not only for mobile apps, but for any kind of application following material design. There's sort of some standards around how navigation, how it works, and what the look and feel is like. So this is what we're going to use. This is probably the most common. It's called the app bar. Older versions of Android, they called this the action bar. So the app bar is kind of a newer, more fully featured version of the app bar. So something that goes across the top, it allows us to have drop down this hamburger style menu. We can have icons. We can also add things in a context menu here. So we've got all of these options. It's also typically used to brand our app, the app bar. So there's a few ways we can do this. If we create a bunch of empty activities, then we're probably going to put the app bar on each of the activities that we want. If we want to use an app bar on all our activities, probably a little late for us to do this with the music library, that's where that basic activity template comes into play. The basic activity template, if we use that, it basically, instead of creating a single activity file, it creates 2. So there's kind of a main activity, which includes the app bar, or other navigation if we want, and then it creates kind of a content activity called content main. So it splits it into 2. And that allows things like the app bar or the floating action button. Basically, the main activity becomes almost like a template that the other activities can inherit and use. So a couple of real example apps, what we might see here. So titles, context menu, icons, settings menu, back arrow. Those are typical things you might expect to see in the app bar. I would bet if you looked at 10 random apps on an Android device, I would bet you at least 8 of them use the app bar. Not our only option. We've got this navigation drawer, right? So it comes in from the side, pops open, and then we close it. We also have bottom tabs. So I've got a couple people working with me on a research project, and they actually use the bottom tabs instead. So there's nothing at the top of the screen except the title for the activity. There's 3 or 4 icons at the bottom, users to navigate around. There's also tabbed activities. We've probably seen these. If I think about it, we could probably think of, well, can anybody think of an app that uses this kind of nav? Off the top of your head. Ben? Yeah, Facebook's app uses that structure. So we're going to use the app bar. It's probably the most common. And it's fairly predictable in terms of our users often expect to see that app bar, and they tend to be familiar with it. It's fairly consistent throughout a lot of apps. So a few things we have to do in terms of setting this up. The first one is we no longer have to do this manually. This is automatic. If we look, the activities we've already created, they already inherit from app.compat activity, because the app bar is part of a class which we used to have to add manually to Android Studio, but now it's there automatically. And that is in our build.gradle, we've already got this Android support, this app compatibility library. So several versions ago, this dependency wasn't here. You had to manually put it in order to be able to use the app bar. We now get it automatically at the current API level. That also means on all of our activities, you'll notice in the class, they all automatically extend app.compat activity. Older versions of Android projects, they won't do this automatically. So you'll have to add this inheritance directly. So fortunately, we don't have to, but you need to know it's there and that the app bar isn't going to work without it. Another thing we're going to want to do is in our application, rather than our theme already kind of has this action bar. So we want to turn it off in our app theme and manually add it to whatever activities needed. So we're not going to put the app bar on our register and login activities. We're only going to put it on main activity. And actually, we'll create another activity. We already have a way of navigating from the artist to the tracks activity or the artist list. Can't remember what we called it. But we're going to want to create a profile activity, and we'll use the app bar to let users move between main activity and profile. We'll create a couple of icons on our toolbar, and they can navigate that way. So this is what our app bar might look like. We're going to use this toolbar class. There are 2 toolbar objects. There's a native Android toolbar object. That one's really old. So if in your activity you just type the tag toolbar, it will come up. But that's the old one. That's not part of this version 7 compatibility library. So we want this one instead. So it's going to look something like this. And then any activity that's going to use it, we need to instantiate it with this method called set support action toolbar. That basically adds the toolbar to your activity. Until you do that, it's not going to show up. And then how do we actually work with it? So what we'll do is we have a resource file. We're going to create a resource file called mainmenu.xml. And in there, we'll define options in the menu. They're going to look something like this. We're going to grab a couple of icons from the material icons site. We'll have one icon that will represent the main activity, our artist list, and then a separate icon representing the profile activity, and we're going to add those. So we'll add those first as drawable resources, and then we'll use those rather than text on our menu icons. So this is a separate file. This took me a little while to figure out because they missed this in the official documentation. In order for the items to show up on the menu, we've got to call the inflate method of our menu. Otherwise, we have an activity bar with nothing on it. The menu never actually gets added to it. And if you go through the official Android docs, this piece of code is actually missing. They forgot this. You can go through the whole thing and then wonder, as I did, hey, why is I have my action bar, where are my menu items? They're not here. And then lastly, we'll need an override method in our activity that determines where we have our event handlers here. What happens when the users choose one of the options in the menu? Right? And typically we're going to use an intent, most likely, right? They're starting another activity, making an implicit intent to, sorry, an explicit intent to go and do something else outside of our app. And so this is kind of the process we want to go through. Part of the other reason, actually I just skipped over this. I talked about this toolbar. So the reason we're using the newer toolbar rather than the old one worked, but the newer toolbar includes a lot more support for multiple devices and is also, it just gives us much greater consistency. It's consistent with the material design guidelines, and it should behave the same way at different API levels, unlike the older toolbar. So we'll start, actually, the first thing we want to do is let's create a really simple profile activity, and then we can create the app bar and the toolbar so we can navigate between the main activity and the profile activity. So let's go back here. I will add a new, empty activity, which we'll call profile activity. And all we'll put on the profile activity basically is the users will put a text view with the user's email on it, and we'll add that logout floating action button that we have on the main activity. Call it profile. And because we've got this checkbox enabled, it will automatically inherit from the compat activity, so it will allow for the action bar. So if we look at this in design view, it's empty. Put on a text view. We'll anchor this right in the center. We'll call this. We'll make the text appearance large. I'll go and grab the floating action button control from our main activity. We'll just copy and paste that in here. So that's our log out button, kind of floats of my main activity. Grab the floating action button. And I'll create our logout view, or our logout method, which we can also just copy that code from the main activity. Now, if we're going to sign a user out, then we obviously need to instantiate Firebase here. We'll also need to instantiate Firebase anyway, because we'll want to call the getCurrentUser method to grab the username of the person who's logged in. We'll make a reference. And then we can use our authDB class. We can call getCurrentUser, which will give us access to the username. We can render that on our TextView. So we'll declare the TextView. We'll instantiate our text view, and then we can set the text. We'll just call that getCurrentUser and get email. This should render the user's email on the text view. Now, I'd like to run this and check this out. The only problem is right now we have no way to get to the profile screen. We want to build a toolbar to navigate us. We don't have a toolbar yet. So maybe what I'll do just for the moment is I'll just toggle the code on our login. That if we log in successfully, right now the user goes to the main activity. We'll just comment that out temporarily and take them to the profile activity instead. That way we can just verify that this is all working. So I'll leave this code up here for a minute. If you've already got it all, you can open up your login activity and go to the login method. And we have an intent there that if a login is successful, it loads the main activity. Just change the word main to profile for the moment. We'll put it back to main afterwards. We just want to make sure that our profile works, that our username shows up in the middle of the screen, and that we have a floating action button that will let us log out. So I'm just going to try this to see if we need to do anything else with it. I'll go to my login. So in my login user method we wrote last week where we authenticated with username and password, we've said if sign in task is successful, we're redirecting to the main activity. That's on my line 93. I'm going to temporarily change that to load my profile activity instead. So I'm going to try to log in. I'm not going to use Google. I'm just going to use my username and password. With abc@text.com and abc123. Okay, so that's the result we wanted. We wanted the profile activity. Sure, I'll let my emulator save my credential. Don't know why we didn't get that offer last week, but so my username is here. I've got my floating action button, which logs me back out. I'm going to toggle this back now. Basically, our profile activity is done until we go and add the toolbar. We just wanted to make sure we could get our profile activity working the way it's supposed to. So I'll just undo that change, set that back. I can close up the login activity. Again, here's all the code in profile. It's fairly simple. Connect to Firebase authentication, instantiate our TextView, grab the user's email and stick it on our TextView. So now we want to start to build and configure our app bar. So there's about 4 or 5 steps we're going to have to go through to build the app bar, and then a few additional steps we need to take to instantiate it and attach it to these activities, as well as handle the events that we want to have happen within that app bar. So for starters, I want to grab a couple of icons from the material icon library. I want to get an icon that will represent the artist activity, the list of artists, and a second icon that might represent the profile. So if you follow the link here, last item in lesson 9, material icons. You can use any icons you like. I'll show you which ones I'm going to use for this. Find them. Hang on, I'm just going to search for them. I found 2 I liked. Okay. Okay, one is called Recent Actors. So it's in this audio video section. I thought this is not bad. It represents a list and it's people. So I'm going to click on this Recent Actors. And I'm going to take I'll try to take the SVG. So I'll download the SVG for this. If we have to go back and grab the PNG, we will. So I'll download the SVG here. I'll save that one. And the other one I want is just called person. This one down in social. So we'll use that as our profile icon. So I'll download the SVG for this one. If you want to use different icons, by all means, go right ahead. Whoops. I'm going to download those two SVGs, the recent actors and person. So those will be my two toolbar icons. You can use any icons you like. That will be for the main activity, because the main activity shows our list of artists. And after spending countless hours looking through this page, I decided that was the most appropriate icon. Feel free to pick something else. That's in the AV section, Sean, if you're looking for that one.
Oh, no, I'm just taking the icon from the Android Studio already.
Got it. That's fine.
No, they didn't have it.
Yeah, probably not. Okay, so I'm going to click on File, New. I'll have to do this twice. I'll choose Image Asset. I'm going to call this first one IC Artists. I'll change the layer name to IC Artists. And then I'm going to browse to that recent actors SVG file. So this is what I want the icon to look like. That will represent our main activity. We'll call it IC Artists, and our layer name is IC Artists foreground. And I'll just click Next and Finish. And then I'm going to do the same thing to add the person icon. So again, create a new image asset. This one I'll call IC Profile. And IC Profile foreground will be the layer. And then I'm going to browse and pick the person SVG. And I'll click Next. I'll finish. So now we can see we've got the artist and profile in our drawable resources. So we'll be able to add items in our menu and set the icons equal to those two SVG files. So this we've taken care of. When we created the activities, they've already extended the app compat activity, so we're good there. We need to configure this. So we need to set the theme of our application in the Android manifest. We want to set the style to light with no action bar. We're removing any action bar from the theme. So we'll open up, so under manifest, open up Android manifest. So right now we've got style and app theme. We want to change that to theme. We want this option. App compat, light, no action bar. If we don't do this, our appbar is not going to be visible. It's going to be hidden behind the built-in application action bar. In effect, there's two. and the one we want to use is going to be in the background. So now we want to create the toolbar on our, we'll put it on our main activity, we'll get it working, and then once we're happy with it, we'll add it to the profile activity as well. Both the control itself as well as the code. So on our main activity, we'll need to open up the XML. So I'm going to go right up to the top before my artist name edit text, but inside our constraint layout. So when I type toolbar, notice we get these 3 toolbars. We get the collapsing toolbar, which we're not using. This is the old original Android toolbar, but we want the first one. We want the version 7 widget toolbar. So our width is going to match the parent. We want it to span the entire width. Our height, we actually have Android attribute. Called action bar size. So that's like the default height for the action bar. May as well use that default so it'll be standard and it'll look like a normally sized Android action bar. We'll give it an ID. We'll just call it toolbar. Turn it to the top. We also want to set this elevation. Go look at the docs. I don't have a good explanation for exactly what elevation does. I know what it does. Sorry, adds a shadow. Thank you. We'll give it a little 4 dp shadow. We also are going to set both the theme and the pop-up theme. So the theme will be this one. For app compat action bar is the theme. We'll set our pop-up theme. You can play around with some of these to experiment with the UI. Try it like this. We'll see how it is. I'll go and look at my colors for a minute. We'll see. So maybe we'll run this and have a quick look at it. This is on our main activity, so we're going to have to log in order to see it. Okay, having a good time? Okay. Well, it shows up. Notice there's nothing on it, but our toolbar is here. Now I'm thinking also we may want to perhaps use a lighter color, or else we may need to make those icons white. I don't know how well the black is going to show up, so I may want to grab those and re-add those images so that our toolbar icons are white rather than black. The other thing is we probably now need to add some margin or padding above that first text view because the app bar is over top. So we want to just push things down a little bit. So on my edit text, I'll add a top margin. We probably have to push it down more. We'll try 20 and see where that takes us. Yeah, I suppose we could. We you know, well, 20 is not enough. Okay, let's. Good point. Let's change it. Try it, but I think we'll still want at least some padding or margin anyway. See what that does. Okay, it's here. So maybe it's okay there if we constrain it. I'm okay with that. If you want to add some margin or padding, you could. All right, it's 10 after 9, so we have something showing up. So maybe now's not a bad time for us to take a break. I will push what we've done so far. We'll take a break. When everybody's back, we'll resume with getting this to run.